Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm gonna walk you through the Terraform documentation and also we'll try to authenticate Terraform with AWS, right? So first things first, when you launch any resources in AWS, so you need to ask these three questions in your mind. So first thing, how are you trying to authenticate with AWS? And the next one is in which AWS region the resources needs to be created and which resources are you trying to create. For example, it can be an EC2 instance, S3 bucket, IAM user, anything, right? So you should be knowing answers to these questions. First, let us go one by one. Okay. First, let us pick the first question. How to authenticate to AWS? Usually, when you manually try and log in to AWS, how will you do it? So we'll go to our browser. We'll search for aws.amazon.com/console. Right? We'll just click on sign in. So either you can log in as an IAM user or a root user. You'll provide your email address, your password, and then you will log into your AWS console, right? So this is how your management console looks like, and this is what you have, right? So usually you do it this way when you do it manually. But when you're working with Terraform, you cannot access this console, right? You cannot access this management console. Then how will you log in? There are different ways of logging in using programmatic way. If you have watched the previous video, these videos I've already added in my queue under Terraform plus AWS playlist. So if you go ahead and check these videos, you will understand why have we created AWS CLI profile for IAM user. If you do not have time, at least go ahead and watch this video. It will help you a lot, right? So there are different ways to authenticate with AWS, right? So how to know what method should I use, right? So just go to Terraform documentation. Okay, so under Terraform documentation, you have something called as registry. Okay, so you can go there, and here, if you remember in the first class, I told you that we have multiple providers that are supported by Terraform. Terraform supports variety of providers, right? Under that, AWS is one among them. So if you want to just look at what are the different providers that Terraform supports, you can just click on browse providers. Here, if you see, we have AWS, Azure, GCP, Kubernetes, Alibaba Cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. There are many providers, right? And the list goes on. If you see here, we have a minimum 2603 providers, right? So there are different things available in Terraform. You need to pick whichever you are working on. So we'll talk about these things later on. Also, we have official, partner, and community. So there are different badges by using which you can recognize which is official one, which is partnered one, which is community build provider, all those things. We'll talk about that in a separate video. But right now, let's try to understand only how to pick the providers, right? So we are working with AWS, right? We need to select AWS. Here, if you see here, this is officially developed by HashiCorp itself. So we are safe to use it. And this is very important that HashiCorp keeps on updating any providers that they support. For example, if you see here, downloads in a week, we have 2.5 million, and downloads in a month is also this, and downloads in this year is crossed 620.7 million downloads, right? And over all the time, we have reached around 1.2 billion users who have downloaded AWS provider. By this, you can understand how vastly AWS is growing with Terraform, right? So this is what we have in the documentation. But how to search, how to authenticate with AWS, right? For that, what you have to do, you can just select documentation here. Okay, so here it will provide different things. Okay, one, it will mention the provider here, and it will give you an overview of what it is and how to use it, right? If you see here, and you will have a brief documentation on what it is going to do. And the beauty of this Terraform documentation is that it will also provide you an example usage here itself. So how you can make use of this block, right? So previously we were not having this Terraform block. They have introduced it for 1.3 0.13 Terraform versions, that the versions that come after Terraform 0.13 will have Terraform block. It works even if you do not add this one, but we'll talk about this more in a later videos. Okay, but important thing is, if you see here, they have commented configure the AWS provider, and you need to add this block to in order to create your resources, in order to authenticate with AWS, right? But if you are using the earlier versions, earlier to 0 or 0.12, you can just add provider block. You don't need to add Terraform. And even in 0.13, even if you do not provide this Terraform block, it will work. So now you might ask, what is Terraform block, right? So don't worry about Terraform block, what is provider block and all. So in Terraform block, it will contain Terraform related information. What version of Terraform, what version of AWS you want, you can specify that. Okay, provider, in a provider block, from this flower bracket to this flower bracket or braces, right? So it is one block. So this under that whatever we have, right? So that we call that as parameters. So region is one parameter or an argument, right? So we'll talk about that more in the next video, but I'm just giving an high level overview here. Okay, so this is a provider block. We are telling that we are going to use AWS, and this is not same for all the providers. We saw different providers, right? So for AWS it is like this, the syntax is like this. You cannot, you cannot do any coding part for your Terraform without this documentation. This documentation is a gold mine for you, right? So if you see here, these are the different services that we have that supports Terraform, right? These are all AWS related services. We have config, we have code commit, we have code build. All these things are related to your Terraform, right? Or AWS. So using this particular documentation, you can, go ahead and build on it. Right, if you see here, we have provider, and we are trying to say that we are going to use AWS provider. Now let's say we are going to use another provider. Let's say we will select Azure and see what are the provider block that we have in Azure. I'll select Azure. Okay, here if you see, Azure also has got their official badge. Okay, now if you go to documentation, here if you see, the provider block for Azure is different. It is Azure RM, right? And they have something else, features and all those things. But in our AWS, we have, AWS, this one, we have region to be mentioned, because while creating any resource, we select the region here in the console, right? Usually by default it will be North Virginia, but if you want any other region, you will go ahead and select it. That is what we have mentioned in the documentation also. First, how do you authenticate? Next, in which region you want to deploy the resource, right? So that is what you have to mention in the provider block also, right? You don't need to remember the syntax completely, but I will tell you one tip how to remember it. Okay, so this is about authentication, right? Provider block, sorry. We'll go to authentication now. So there are many different ways to authenticate with your AWS, right? So one is with the parameters in the provider configuration, one by using environment variable, one by using shared credentials and container credentials, instant profile. We have these many options that we use, right? So the one thing that you can do is this one. You can go with this provider block, where you will specify a region, where you will specify an access key and secret key. You know what is secret key and access key. We have also made a video on that. I've done that here. If you see this one, create an IAM user with a programmatic access. So this method has got one problem. The problem is, if you specify access key here, right? So whatever access key and secret key that we get from the AWS console, if you specify here and if you upload this code to GitHub repository, let's say you are on an organization where 2 or 3 people working on the same code, then what you will do, you will upload it to your GitHub repo. If anyone has access to that particular repository, they can find the access key, secret key, and they can start using it, start using the AWS on themselves, right? That will be a security risk. So what we can do is we can create an IAM profile for this one. That is what we have done, right? So the best possible way to go with is having a profile for your own Terraform. That is what we have done in this particular video. Go ahead and watch this video and come back, right? So that is what we have done. Now authentication, we will use a profile that we have created in the first video, right? So first question is answered now. How do you authenticate? One is by using access key, secret key. Other one is going with the profile option. So in industry they will always use a profile option itself, okay? Or they will create an IAM role also. That is also possible, okay? So that's it for first one. Next, in which region you want to create the resource. So that is what we need to provide here in the provider block only, right? If you see here in provider block, we will specify which region we want to use it, right? That is also mentioned here. Next question, in which resource are you trying to launch? Whether it can be an EC2, whether it can be an S3, all those things you have, right? Here if you go ahead and search for EC2, you will get to see what are the different things that you can do with EC2, right? Here if you see, we have EC2 Elastic Cloud Compute, we have AWS AMI, EC2 Fleet, EC2 Host, EC2 EIP, Elastic IP instance. Or if you want to launch an instance, you can go here, AWS instance. You can copy this block example code and you can start writing your code, right? Now let us try to authenticate with AWS using Terraform script. Okay, so for that what I have done is I have created one of the folder in my laptop. I've named that folder as 30 days of Terraform. Okay, under that I have created one file called first underscore terraform underscore script.tf. So all your Terraform files should end with .tf extension. That is a standard. If you download and install Terraform, your editor will automatically recognize it and it will add the HashiCorp Terraform logo in front of the TF file that you create. You need to end that file with .tf. Okay, so that is one important thing. Okay, I hope you're on clear this. Now let us go ahead and create a provider block in our script. Okay, so just to create a provider block, so you can just type in provider. It will automatically help you here itself. Syntax, everything it will give you here itself. If you see, I just type in a wrong spell, but here it is giving me provider block. If you just hit enter, it will automatically give you this syntax. It is starting with the curly braces, ending with the curly braces. In between you have to mention the provider here. What is the provider that we are using? We are using AWS. Mention that and that's all. Next, if you want to create resources, what is the first thing that you need to select? Which region you are trying to create it. Let us go, and if you do not know what you have to do here, what you can just do is click on Control and space. It will automatically give you what are the parameters or the arguments that you can enter here, right? If you see here, we have region. You can just select that and you can specify the region. So to specify a region, you go back to your AWS console. If you see here, you have this format, right? US East 1, US East 2. You need to mention these in the region. Okay, so I'm good with US East 1. So I'll select the same thing here also. US East 1. That's all. That is all you have to do. Next thing, I told you that I'm not going to use access key and secret key. If you are trying to use access key and secret key, so what you can just do is just click on access key, add a double quotes, and here mention the access key ID. Next, if you are trying to use secret key, what you can do is, if you see here, it will recommend just have to click control and space. Secret key, what is the secret key that you have? You can mention here. This is not a right way, because if I push this code to in the GitHub, so which is my public repository, anyone can access it. So what I've done is I've created a separate profile for that. So if you want to enter profile, what you can just do is, I'll just say profile. What is the profile that you are trying to use? You can mention here. What is that? So if you have seen my previous video, it was Terraform -user. This is the profile that we had created, right? So this is all you have to do to authenticate with your AWS, right? So save this file and open a new terminal. Just to verify if you are working correctly, if this provider block is working fine or not. So what you need to do is be in the folder that you have this script. In my case, I am inside my 30 days of Terraform folder. That is what I have here. Now what you have to do is you will have to just type in Terraform init. This is the first command that we are learning, Terraform init. Basically what it will do is, if you are mentioning provider as AWS, right? So Terraform is a declarative language. It will not go ahead and install all the things previously itself. If you see here, first we were having only this file, first Terraform _script. But if you see, after initialized, what it has done is it has created 2 more files or folders here, right? So what is inside that we will see. Okay, first let's understand what is the use of Terraform init. Basically what it will do is it will initialize the Terraform and it will download all your plugins, whatever you have mentioned. So if you are using AWS, it will go ahead and install AWS plugin for you, right? If you are using Azure plugin, it will go ahead and install Azure for you. If you are using GitHub or Oracle Cloud, it will go ahead and install that plugin for you. It will not keep it as downloaded always. Whatever you will mention here, it will go ahead and install it for you. That is what the use of your init script, Terraform init, initialize, right? If you see here, you will get a response like this: Terraform has been initialized, right? So if you get this confirmation, you can just clear the screen, right? That we have successfully initiated the authentication. You have successfully authenticated with your AWS provider. Now if you see here, this has created 2 different directories for us. If you see, I'll just open up in my file explorer. This particular directory will open up in a file explorer. Okay, I'll go here. If you see here, we have something called as .terraform. If you see here, right, we only had this one previously, first Terraform script, but now after initializing, these 2 got initialized. We'll speak about this Terraform log HCL later, but concentrate on .terraform now. So if I go inside .terraform, we have something called as providers. Providers is what we have mentioned here, right? So let's see what is inside that provider. I'll get inside provider. In Terraform, we spoke about this registry.terraform.io. If you go back to your documentation, if you see here, registry.terraform.io, that is where it has got and downloaded your plugin, right? Let me go back here, open, get inside that. You have HashiCorp, get inside that. If you see here, we have AWS, right? AWS is a provider in our case. See, we have specified AWS here. Let's get inside AWS also. If you see, this is the version of AWS that it has got downloaded. Let me get inside further. If you see, this is my Windows architecture. So I'm using this Windows AMD 64-bit. So it has got downloaded that. If you see here, it has downloaded an exe file or an application file, Terraform-provider-AWS with a version number, right? So if they ask you in interview or something, if I run this script, what will happen? You just need to say that it will go ahead and download the AWS plugin in your current working directory, right? So that is what the use of provider or plugin. right? So we'll talk about other things in the next coming videos, but these are the basic things that you need to understand before even starting to write your own script. Okay, in next video, what we can do is we can try and create our own resource from the scratch. We'll try and create an EC2 instance and we'll see how we can code it, right? So that's it for today's video. If you're liking the content that I'm creating, please consider subscribing and share it among your friends. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.